Bear with me for a moment here while I try to get through the disclaimers as fast as possible. This video is going to include spoilers for Petscop and Silent Hill Homecoming. Also, it has very light spoilers for Silent Hill 2, nothing major. It's going to include some pretty fucked up themes of child abuse as well. You should watch all the Petscop before watching this video. Seriously, I was very glad I did before watching any videos on it. This is not an examination video, so I won't be explaining everything. It's just me putting our focus on a specific topic and applying to Petscop. For a company that's becoming a Petscop, you should watch on my masterclasses Petscop Investigation. Fuck you for having a name that's so hard to say fast, by the way. Maybe play Silent Hill too many at the time the spoilers here are made, but it's still worth it. I recommend the director's cut for PT tricked up with the enhanced edition mods. Fuck Homecoming, just read the wiki for that. Anyways, here's one to all. No, seriously though, here's the actual video. It's not really a funny one. Petscop is a web series about a guy, presumably named Paul, who finds an unreleased PlayStation 1 game in his room and documents his findings in it.
Alright, so, this is just to, prove to you that I'm not lying about this game that I found.
As time goes on, it quickly becomes apparent that the game is hiding secrets relating to cases of child abuse that the game's creator was somehow at the center of in the 90s.
That's a dead kid.
And as Paul goes further in, he quickly realizes that he's more tangled up in this than he ever could have known.
I think that was based off of a conversation that I had last year on my birthday.
The game uses the facade of a colorful PlayStation 1 game for kids. Anything unsettling about it can easily be written off with the fact that the game is seemingly unfinished. After using a cheat code though, Paul is able to enter a darker version of the game that uses complicated puzzles, cryptic messages, symbolism, and references to real-world events in order to paint a picture of a serial child abuser named Marvin and the children he abused. In particular, Michael, although he doesn't get as much attention as other characters like Care, Belle, and Tiara, is pivotal to understanding what's actually happening in the game and why it was made in the first place. There's a character named Rainer, who's a jaded, cynical figure that appears in notes throughout the game, alluding to the game's true purpose before finally revealing himself to not just be the creator, but also Michael's brother. He likely watched Marvin's crimes unfold and never saw the perpetrator, or possibly perpetrators, brought to justice, and probably made the game as a way to call them out and make sure these events are never forgotten. Those of you who survived me trying to put this cryptic plot into clear terms should keep in mind that I'm just giving an overview of the parts of the series relevant to this video. There's a lot to keep in mind and a shit ton of stuff I haven't even touched up on a little, like the real world parallels with Candace Newmaker. Michael may or may not have been murdered, or his death could just be a metaphor for him fundamentally changing after a traumatic experience. Belle and Tiara, Paul may have been forced to do this, the fucking windmill. There's a lot more than I can go through in a video not specifically about decoding Petscop, and you can just assume everything here is almost entirely speculation, seeing as nothing is clear in this series. For our purposes, Petscop is a series about Paul unfolding a cycle of child abuse that he may have been involved in without his knowledge. Doesn't mean that's actually what it's about, just what we're focusing on here. In stark contrast to that, you have Silent Hill Homecoming, which is basically the Silent Hill equivalent of bootleg games grandmas get for the grandkids. It's definitely the most controversial of the series, right alongside the train wreck that is Shattered Memories. Ask anyone what they think of it and you'll either get, "It's the best of the Western Silent Hill games," or "It's the worst Silent Hill game ever made, including the arcade and mobile ones." It's probably because this is the game with the most potential out of all the Western ones, but the game itself is, you know... It can't be all bad though. The console version has over 70% on Metacritic, and that's a pretty decent score. Apparently the graphics were known for being pretty good, and I personally remember loving the fuck out of this game when I was younger, so there must be something here. Let's check out a scene from it.
Family is the most important thing, Alex. I would do anything to protect them. That's why I sacrificed my daughter.
What?
The founders. They had good intentions. They left the Order to start a new life in Shepherd's Glen. They feared the wrath of our God. So they made a pact. Once every 50 years, founding families must make an offering to appease the god. One of our children, our own flesh and blood, I watched the light fade from Moon's eyes as I took her life. No, death would protect our family.
God.
Protect.
Where's Joshua?
Don't you see? Because of him, our sacrifices were in vain. The pact with our God was broken. Your father's lack of conviction cursed us all. Was to revive the order which our founders abandoned. The true faith.
You know what? That wasn't very fair of me at all. Let's use a different one.
After all I've done, you still wear my old dog tags. That must mean something.
Yep, nope, it really is just that bad. Silent Hill 2 was released 7 years earlier, and it looks way better than this. All jabs at the graphics aside, this game is trying way too hard to fit in with every other PlayStation 3 action title out there, with the addition of things like a HUD, health bars, a more streamlined combat system that encourages combat instead of discourages it, the worst excuses of all time for putting busty nurses in, and a storyline with lore that pertains to something completely different than what's actually happening in the game. Speaking of which, the main story is literally just the same shit we've seen a million times. Alex Shepard, an ex-soldier, returns to his hometown of Shepherd's Glen to find out that his brother and father have gone missing because searching for other people is literally the only reason anyone ever goes to Silent Hill, right? Along the way, he gets caught up in some shit with the Order, the cult that lives in Silent Hill and his surrounding towns, and finds out about a secret pact between the founding families of Shepherd's Glen and the God of the Order, demanding that a child be sacrificed brutally once every 50 years. Too much of the game is devoted to plot lines we've already thoroughly explored in this series, like chasing down this dipshit kid and a bunch of stuff about how evil the Order is. The parts that don't revolve around that revolve around some symbolism to do with Alex's military service, but that's just a setup for a plot twist where it turns out he was never even in the military and imagined the whole thing, which leads to finding out that his brother has been dead the whole time from a boating accident that Alex felt responsible for, causing him to go crazy enough to imagine being in the military. Oh yeah, and by the way, this cult is super evil, you guys. There's a shit ton of potential here though. A Silent Hill game about a soldier could give us some of the most harrowing gameplay of all time, with a story that hits way too close to reality like Silent Hill is always known to do. You know, like Jacob's Ladder. Remember when Silent Hill was inspired by that instead of just stealing from it? More important to what we'll be talking about, the Order stuff is a pretty damn good setup for a game about child abuse, with you being a clueless bystander caught up in the town's collective delusions and guilt over what they thought they had to do to appease a god. All of this supernatural cult shit and sacrifices could have just been a backdrop for these themes, like what Silent Hill 1 and 3 did with Alyssa. Instead, the themes that used to drive the series are just set dressing now. Instead of the Order being a plot device for the harder hitting themes, those themes are now just a plot device for the Order. Silent Hill has always been known for dealing with topics that people really don't want to talk about in an effective, respectful, and weighted manner. One of my favorite things is when media is willing to tackle these issues with the weight that they require in order to make people pay attention, such as the use of symbolism in Silent Hill that allows the player to imagine these things in a way that doesn't completely turn them away, but lets them internalize the reality of these situations. Petscop treats these topics with just the right amount of weight. The psyche of a child in an abusive situation is shown in intense, uncomfortable detail without managing to show anything explicit, letting the viewer's imaginations travel to the worst possible places. Referencing real-world events only makes it more effective because they serve as an anchor point to remind everyone that this isn't just set dressing, or plot devices, or topics chose for shock and horror value. This is stuff that happens in real life. This reflects the experiences of people out there who are being ignored until it's too late. This is important to talk about. The new Maker plane largely reflects what the world looks like to a child in these situations. A vast, confusing, and dark place where everything is potentially dangerous and nobody is there to help. The solutions are overly complicated and borderline impossible, and they usually only serve to get you more entrenched instead of offering any real help. Paul hammers in these themes just as much as the game itself. He does things while trying to move on in the game that completely ignore his better sense of morality just so he can feel some sense of progression. The game slowly conditions him into becoming part of the problem, showing how clueless adults unknowingly, or just uncaringly, help the cycle of abuse in ways they don't fully understand or care to think about. Right from the start, it drives Paul to make some questionable decisions, such as removing flower petals in the shed even though it's obviously hurting Care, or using the tool in the windmill to... whatever that's a metaphor for. Things get much worse though. Knowing Marvin is likely the abuser the game is intended for, he brings him to Care's house, follows his directions, and plays out what Marvin did to Care, breaking into her room, stealing Care, and bringing her back to the child library as Care NLM. Paul just does it non-linearly. Petscop shows everything from mild examples of conditioning to extreme examples of child abuse and possible murder to show the full extent of how abuse affects everyone around it, and how children can be subjected to all sorts of horrifying things without the adults around ever figuring it out. You don't get any of that with Homecoming. There's symbolism, there's lore, even though the graphics are terrible, some of the imagery is still amazing, the music is great, the gameplay is definitely better than Origins, but it's all very surface level. At the end of the day, it's just another story about a crazy cult with a "you were crazy all along too" twist. The kids are portrayed as nothing more than vengeful spirits and manifestations of guilt that you have to beat the shit out of, whose plights are quickly glazed over in favor of what some delusional guy is dealing with. Even the kid that does take center stage is just a half-assed attempt at mixing Cheryl with Mary. I'm not saying they'd have to focus entirely on the kids, even Petscop didn't do that. Most of Petscop isn't even about the kids, I just singled out a bunch of the parts that were for this video. What I am saying is that both Petscop and Silent Hill have pulled off similar themes for side characters, so why couldn't Homecoming? Angela from Silent Hill 2 is an amazing example. Angela shows you an adult relapsing heavily after being brought back into a world much like the one she was in while she was being abused. She can't seem to make up her mind about if James is sincere at all or if he's just trying to get closer to her to take advantage. When you've lived in a world where sincerity is just a trick people use to hurt you, being able to adjust to see when people are genuinely trying to offer help or be friendly can be nearly impossible. What from the outside can look like erratic and hysterical behavior is really showing the long-term effects that this shit can have on people. Despite her being a side character with so much less screen time, that doesn't mean her story doesn't still carry weight and real-world implications. And that's the problem with Homecoming. There are no real-world implications. None of the real-world themes offer any insight into anything, and the game spends most of its time on themes that can only be applied to itself and possibly Scientology. The whole point of Silent Hill is that the town holds up a mirror to both the protagonist and the player. You might not have it as bad as Harry, James, Heather, or, the last one.
What the hell? What the hell?
But everyone can relate to losing a loved one. Everyone knows how it feels to be lost, alone, and trapped. The new Maker plane offers a window into the darkest parts of society and by extension, the darkest parts of ourselves. By keeping everything so cryptic and ambiguous, it lets people project their own thoughts, feelings, and beliefs onto it. Now, that obviously doesn't mean that literally any old theory is correct. But it does mean that you can find a little bit of yourself in it, and while Petscop is honestly one of the most disturbing things out there, there's something comforting in that. That's why I compare Petscop to Silent Hill. Both show reflections of society and ourselves in astoundingly effective ways that most things don't even dare to attempt. And that's why Homecoming sucks. Because it didn't even dare to attempt. I'm sorry if my narration was shitty, I'm coming down from a sickness, like half of this video was recorded while spitting out blood. I'd like to take this time at the end to remind everyone that everything about Petscop in here was just speculation. If you haven't already, go and watch Petscop and make your own conclusions. A huge thanks to my Patreon subscribers who have been incredibly patient with me and asked me to thank them in the form of a song. Here goes. If you enjoyed this video even a little bit and want to see where this channel goes, please consider subscribing and donating to my Patreon because it's only going to get better from here. If you donate to my Patreon, you get to pick the topic for my next video, see content early, hear music that I haven't put up anywhere else, see works in progress and exclusive content that's only on there, and even force me to make specific things for you if you're loaded enough. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you're doing well. Good nighty.
Your voice is like watery shit hiccups